attendees, just to let you know, this presentation is being recorded. So if you don't want your name or your face to appear in the recording, feel free to turn off your cameras and change your screen name. And I will be monitoring the chat and making sure that the participants keep their mics muted throughout the presentation. All right, thank you very much. And when you're ready, go ahead and start, Paul.
Okay. Do you see my presentation right now?
Yes.
You see the presenter, you see the regular, how it should look.
Yeah, it looks good.
Yep.
It's not, oddly, it's not giving me the chance to see my presenter view. It usually lets me, let me just stop for a second and see. I don't know why that. Let me try one more time. It says I'm sharing. No, it's not letting me. Okay, luckily I kind of know my presentation, so I should be able to go through it. I may be looking like I'm not looking at you guys, but because I can't see it on the screen with my camera. Anyway, thank you very much for joining this session. I think many of you are familiar with Xreading. However, for those of you who are not, I'm going to first start with just a brief explanation of what it is. I'm sorry if it's, obviously very well known for some of you who've been using it for years. But every time I give this kind of presentation, I always find there's about a quarter to half the people who have heard of Xreading, especially in a conference like this, don't actually know what it is. So I'll start with that, and then I'll get into some of the new things we've added this year and things that are coming. Okay. So first of all, as an overview, it's an online library of over 1,400 graded readers from almost every major publisher. It gives unlimited simultaneous use, means every student can read the same book at the same time. So it's not just 1,400 books, it's 1,400 books per student. So if a school has 1,000 students, that's equivalent to almost 1.5 million graded readers. It works on computers and mobile devices. We have audio for almost every book. We have quizzes, background information, things like that, and a standardized level system, which I'll show you in a moment. It's then linked to a learner management system, which allows teachers to track all of their students' reading progress, including not only the books they've read, how many words they've read, how many minutes they've read, things like that, assess their understanding, guide their selections, and assign activities. Okay. Like I said, we have our own level system. Actually, it comes from the ER Foundation because different publishers have different levels. We put them all onto the same scale. And you can see here that there are really a lot of books at every level. We have 14 levels. And I mean, we have like at level 2, there's 72 books, but a student isn't going to be at just level 2. They probably can read level 1, 2, 3, and maybe 4. So every student should have about 300 books at their level. Although it's also probably beneficial for students to read books that are way below their level if they want to improve their fluency. The student side of Xreading, it's very simple. We tried to design it to be for students who are kind of intimidated by technology. They just have to log in and press this add book button, brings them to the library. They can browse or narrow by the different criteria. They can get more information about the book, such as the ratings. They can do a text preview, read the first 5 or 10%, or they can start reading right away. Very importantly, there's a progress bar here at the top, and it moves forward as they are going through the book. So we track their reading progress. Works on mobile devices, like I said before. We use adaptive text, so you don't have to pinch and zoom as though you were reading a PDF. An important point is it's digital, so you can change the view settings, and it can be appropriate depending where you're reading. Over the years, we've been asked to we've been told that this is actually easier for students with reading issues like dyslexia. And we're actually going to be making some more changes, allowing more color schemes and different fonts, and increasing the width of the letters. So again, an advantage if you have students with reading issues, that this may be a good alternative for them, a good option for them. The reading data is saved. And this you can see, you can see how many words a student read in the book. It calculates a percent, also calculates the time, and calculates, tracks the time and calculates their reading speed. And of course, this could be very useful for helping your students improve their fluency and also catching cheaters, because you can see if they've been reading too quickly. We have quizzes for every book. These quizzes are kind of based on the principle of extensive reading, in that they should be very easy and just let the student show they read the book. We're not asking detailed or difficult questions that students may find off-putting, or if a student reads the book and fails the quiz, they're going to be disappointed. We've tried to make the quizzes as easy as possible. We also have the audio, and very importantly at 5 speeds, because students' reading speed does not always match their listening speed. So, and especially because the publishers create the speed of the audio, it may not match. Some are too slow, some are too fast. This is a quick example. This is the original speed from a publisher. Just listen for about 20 seconds. You can see what the publisher wanted and try to read along with it.
Chapter 1, Down the Rabbit Hole. Alice was beginning to get very bored. She and her sister were sitting under the trees.
Okay,
her sister was reading, but Alice had nothing to do.
Yeah, from my experience, most students would find that to be too slow. So we can speed it up the full 20%, and you'll see, is it going to sound like a chipmunk, or is it going to sound natural?
Alice was beginning to get very bored. She and her sister were sitting under the trees.
Okay, I think you can hear, compared to changing the speed without removing the distortion, you can hear a big difference. Oh, sorry. So this is the same 20% faster without removing the distortion.
Chapter 1, Down the Rabbit Hole. Alice was beginning to get very bored. She and her sister were sitting under the trees.
Okay, I think you can see how important it is to remove the distortion, unless you enjoy the chipmunks. Okay, next, a feature is that some teachers don't know about is you can actually hide the text or blur it so students have to listen, which I think could be very useful. This is an area I really think needs research, that I am convinced that if a student is reading and listening for a short amount of time, it's really great for both their listening and their pronunciation, their reading, and their listening. But I'm convinced that if they do it for a longer period of time, they actually stop doing their weaker skill. In other words, for Japanese students whose reading is generally stronger than listening, after a couple of minutes, they would have stopped listening and focus on the text, because that's what they're much stronger at comprehending. Middle Eastern students tend to stop reading, close their eyes, and just listen to the text. Listen to the audio. So this allows teachers to have students do one or the other. It would be great if someone did research on this to find out what actually is going on. Teacher side of Xreading, again, those of you using it, you know this very well. You can see a list of all your classes. You can get a quick overview of what the class is doing. You can choose one class, and instantly you see every student, how many books they read, how many words they read, how many minutes they read, their average quiz score, and their average book rating. Okay, this can be filtered by different dates and exported to Excel anytime you want. You can then select a specific student and see every book they've read, how much they read, when they read, which quizzes they've passed, which books they've read too quickly and not getting credit for. And again, this can be exported to Excel. Teachers can restrict the library. So again, many of us want students to choose from the largest number of books as possible, but sometimes we want to have a select number of books, certain levels, or just a class reader, and all of that is possible. You can go to these various criteria like level headwords and just choose the level you want your students to see. Or in this case, I want all of my students to read the book Egghead. It's a really good book about bullying, a very important topic in Japan. So this is going to be a class reader. I go to select specific title. I choose that book. Submit. Student presses add book, and they can only see Egghead. Okay. Another important point of Xreading is we've integrated MReader. I think by now most people are aware that Xreading and MReader are not enemies. We're not rivals. We work together, and we've actually integrated, despite the fact that we have quizzes in Xreading, we've integrated the MReader quizzes for two reasons. One, it allows schools to integrate their physical library into Xreading. So if a school already has a big physical library, they don't have to give it up for Xreading. Students can still choose a physical book, read it, and then take the MReader quiz in Xreading. So they don't need to even manage two systems. The other benefit, if you saw my presentation yesterday, there is some cheating going on in some places, and MReader quizzes, which have a larger bank of questions, are more difficult to cheat on. And therefore, some schools, even though they're using only digital books, are turning to the MReader quizzes while we're creating more questions for the Xreading quiz questions. So just in case this is a little confusing to understand, what do you mean a physical book in Xreading? Well, if a student chooses a physical book we do not have Pirates of the Caribbean in Xreading, and students love it. Actually, it's not so good, but anyway, that's a different story. I think it's Johnny Depp, although he's not so popular these days. Anyway, student chooses this book, physical book. They go to Xreading, they press add book, they can choose physical, search for it. Oh, there it is. It gets put into their Xreading history. If they take the quiz and pass the quiz, they get credit for that book. Okay. Moving on now, this is the new things. And again, if some of you I know have seen my presentations earlier this year, this is going to be a repeat of some of those features. Our goal for 2021 was trying to help teachers, primarily helping teachers with remote teaching. A lot of the things that we came up with, we'd already thought of before, and we're planning for sometime in the future, and we just fast-tracked them. Okay, so one thing is we need more books because students are reading a lot more than they had in previous years. Monitoring students, now with teachers teaching remotely, it just makes it so much more difficult. What actually are your students doing, especially if their cameras are turned off? Even if their cameras are turned on, you don't really know what's going on. Okay. Communicating with students, obviously there's all sorts, we can communicate in Zoom and email, but if you're using Xreading, teachers sometimes want to give a message through the Xreading system. Motivating students to read more is always challenging. Knowing which books are the most popular books is very helpful for teachers. So we'll start with the newest publishers we've added. I'm constantly trying to get more publishers and a variety of books. So one publisher we added earlier this year is Ways Goose Press. If anybody knows Dorothy Zemock, who has just been a great person in the ELT community as a teacher trainer, as a teacher, as a publisher, textbook writer. She's created her own publishing house, which encourages teachers, or actually independent authors, to write books. And we've added some of hers, including these very good stories from Greta Gorsuch, who I believe lived in Japan for a while and has written some really nice stories about mostly life in America, where she's now based. ProLingua is a very small publisher out of Vermont. Not so well known in Japan, but in America, very well known. I think they're connected to SIT, the School of International Training. And they have a series of books about the immigrant experience. Again, these are kind of American based, but about the different experiences of Vietnamese, Jewish Americans, Syrian Americans. I've read a couple and thought they were very good. The people who are writing quizzes for me have read these and said they were among the best graded readers they've ever written. Just really well written and nice stories, beautiful stories. And Grassroots Press have some higher level books. These are probably in about the 3,000 or 4,000. These are more written for ESL learners in America, but they're, again, very, very good stories. Some other books we're recently added is ABEX, their global issue narratives. And global issues are obviously a very important topic these days. They have only 3 books published, but they're very interesting books. You're not seeing triple here. What this is, they've taken a single story and split it into the perspective of 3 different characters that have some overlapping parts, but other parts are individual to that character. So it's a really interesting, again, the themes, which is kind of mine is about fair trade, traffic is about human trafficking, and identity is about, you know, how people fit into society, especially for marginalized communities. You just can't get any more important topics today, and they're, you know, very, very well written stories. My quiz writer also said these were the greatest, but actually my quiz writer is one of the writers of these books, so that might be a slight bias there. But I actually read them, and they are excellent. And finally, I want to mention the mid-frequency readers. I don't know how many of you are familiar with these. These are ones Paul Nation has developed, I guess is the best word for it. They're the original stories, mostly classics, from public domain, and only the vocabulary is modified. Okay, so there's, I think, 13 stories. But these were a little bit challenging for us because these are actually the original book. So I think Wuthering Heights is something like 150,000 words, one book. And again, going back to what I was talking about yesterday with cheating, we do know that some students would find a way to add that book, and if the teacher isn't being very vigilant, might be able to get away with it. So for these books, we decided to take the unusual step. They do not have quizzes, and therefore they typically will not show up in a student's library unless a teacher has indicated, yes, I want to allow books without quizzes, and therefore that teacher should not be surprised if they see some extremely long books showing up. Okay, and again, the same 13 books, but written at modified, the vocabulary is modified at 3 different levels. Okay. We have more books coming soon. Sunshine Books, which are very, very good books from children's books from a publisher in New Zealand. We added 75 of them about a year ago, and they were extremely popular. So we're adding about another 100. We just signed a contract with them, and they should be coming within the next couple of months. Also, we have French graded readers that will be ready. I think 20 of them will be ready by September. These are very interesting. Rob, what's her name? Sophie Mueller was able to persuade Cengage to allow her to translate Rob Waring's Cengage Foundation books, which are really well written, have great illustrations, into French. So we're going to have the same 42 books available for French classes. And after that, hopefully, I've talked to a Spanish writer who wants to translate them into Spanish and perhaps other languages after that. Okay. And also we're going to be trying to add books, and these are suitable because they look like they could be in Spain or France. We could translate them into Japanese or Chinese as well. I think I'd rather look for original Japanese or Chinese graded readers and add those to Xreading is more our plan. And something I'll be talking about a little bit later is student created materials. That was mentioned in an earlier presentation today. Lots of teachers have been having their students write materials, and we're interested in adding it to Xreading. But there are some challenges involved. Obviously, we pay the publishers, and there may be some issues. How do we pay students? Are the student books too short? Do we have to make compilations? So we're still working out some of the details. There's a teacher up in Tokyo who's for several years has taught a section of his class, has been a project. It's a semester-long project, is writing graded readers. And so we're going to pilot it with just his students, because again, it's not just a student writing a graded reader and giving it to their teacher. They're spending several months developing it, editing it, peer editing it, teacher editing it, and we're going to try that. If it works well, then we'll start inviting other schools, maybe even make some writing competitions among students, and we'll see it. Hopefully that will be a successful way of adding a greater variety of stories to Xreading. Okay, so now some of the new features we've added to Xreading. An important one for teaching remotely is live monitoring. Teachers often want their students to read in class, even for a few minutes. And while you're in the real classroom, you can see what they're doing. Either they're holding a book open, or maybe they're using Xreading on the phone, but the teacher can walk around and see what's going on. Teaching remotely is not so easy. So we've added a feature called Live Monitor. I think I added this in April. If you press here, it takes a moment, and it will tell you exactly what your students are doing at this very moment, or within at least the last 15 seconds. Okay, so gray means the student is not logged in, probably just an absent student. Dark green means they're actively reading a book, and it'll tell you which book they're reading. Light green means they are somewhere in Xreading, they're active, they're on the library or looking at their reading data. That's okay. Pink is the trouble ones. These are students who have logged in recently, but they show no activity on the website. Either they walked away from their computer or they are on a different website. So it's a really good way for teachers to get an idea of what their students are doing in real time. Okay, and the feedback I've got, I'm not teaching anymore, but the feedback I've gotten from teachers has been very positive. This has been very useful for them. Announcements. Okay, again, disseminating information to students can be challenging if you're not meeting them in every class. So we have a new feature called announcements. You can select all of your classes, specific classes, or even specific students you want to send the announcement to. You can write your announcement. You can set the open date and close date, or you can leave those blank. You post it, and the next time a student logs in, actually, I think the next time a student loads any page, they will see that announcement right there. I have the same feature, so some of you might have seen the announcement about this conference when you logged into Xreading. So it looks very similar to that. And yeah, I think it could be useful if you want to share information with a lot of students at once. We can also share information with an individual student, and I'll show you that a little bit later. Another new feature is goals. In the past, teachers would always tell their students, I want you to read this much this semester. I want you to read this much for the class. I want you to read this much for the assignment. But there was no way to visibly display that in Xreading. And it's been a very, very common request. So we've finally figured out a way of doing it. Again, teachers can select the class that they want to choose the goal for. They can choose what kind of goal, books or words. In the future, we may add time as well. Indicate the amount of that goal. And you create it, and then a student will now see their assignment and classes will have a goal here on the right. So the class goal and assignment goal are independent of each other. So you don't have to, that was kind of the complicated part for us. What if a teacher creates a class goal, but not an assignment goal, or creates class goals that don't match assignment goals? So in the end, we just kept them separate. So most teachers choose either a class goal or assignment goal, not both, but it gives you the flexibility to do whatever you want. So far, the feedback has been quite good. We have some enhancements we're planning for the future. For example, teachers can create goals for individual students. Right now, it's just per assignment or per class. So if you have, obviously, there's some students in some classes that you might want to give different goals to. Another feature which is suggested by a teacher was actually students can set their own goal. Okay, hopefully it's not like 10 words, but they can do what, hopefully with the teacher's approval, they can set a goal for themselves. Also, which has been, this is all kind of connected to motivating students to read more. We have created an ExReading Certificate, which can be modified. You don't have to be named Hanako to get it. You can request from me, and I will send you the template. You send it back to me, and I will add my signature. And then you can give it out to students. And it's all modifiable. So one school just did it. They had some really, really funny categories here. Of course, they had the top reader, but I think they had the student who read the most most children's books. They had the student who, had a few different interesting awards. I think the teacher was determined to give like an award to every student in her class for something, which is not how I imagined it being used. But again, that, my idea is to provide the tools for teachers to use it in the way they feel most suitable. Book usage data. This was originally conceived as a great way for teachers to know which are the most popular books. So since I've created Xreading, I am able to see how much and how often every book is used because I have to pay the publishers based on book usage. But teachers couldn't see that, and we just developed a way for teachers to see the book usage at their specific institution. Okay, so it looks like here there's a book usage tab, and you can see every single book in Xreading, and you can see exactly how many times it's been checked out, read more than 10%, which is actually important for me because that's how I consider a book read when I send payment to publishers, completed. But this is very useful because you'll get a good idea if certain books are not being completed, maybe there's something wrong with it. You can see the average quiz score. So I think this could be quite useful. You can also, sort, so you can see which are the most popular books. And then you can actually select a specific book, and you can see every student in your class who read it and when they read it. Okay. Again, I thought this would be really good to know which are the most popular books. It turned out it also has been a very good way to find cheaters. So this is just a slide from my presentation yesterday that something was suspicious. One student was a little bit suspicious. This is a very high level book, Our Mutual Friend. The teacher pointed out this student had not read so many books at this level, especially a 22,000-word book. The student had been mostly reading books about 1,000 words, but on the day before the semester ended, suddenly added a 22,000-word book. So I checked this book, similar to this page, and it turns out this book had been read 4 times at this institution. And all 4 times happened to be right before the deadline. And all 4 students had exactly the same quiz score, and all 4 students had incredibly high reading speed. So again, I think it's still a minority that it's happening, that cheating is going on, but this book usage can be a very good way of tracking down some things like that. Another upcoming feature, I don't think I mentioned in this presentation, is we're giving institutions the ability to remove books from their library. Of course, you can remove a book, as you probably know, from an assignment. You can restrict the library for an assignment. This will allow you to restrict it for the whole institution. So if you know that there's some answers going around your institution, you can get rid of those. Or if for some reason there's some certain particular books that you don't think your students should be reading, or maybe there's some books you want to save. Maybe all the Christmas stories you want to save until December, you can disable them and then enable them for the entire school come December. Okay. Book information is a minor feature that a teacher had asked for, a few teachers, and it was very easy. When teachers see their reading history, they might sometimes wonder, what is this book, Bird Girl? And they don't really know. So now you can just tap on the book cover and it'll just pop up the same information from the library. Nothing revolutionary, but it's just a good way to get information about books in a hurry instead of opening a new tab and searching for it. And you can get some basic information. Credited and uncredited a book. So sometimes a teacher wants to give credit to a student. The student failed the quiz, but maybe because their device crashed or something happened, and they proved to you, they actually read the book. Okay, maybe there was a bad question in the book, or the opposite. A student has passed the book, passed the quiz, but that they didn't really read the book. You found out some way they cheated. In the past, the only way to change that, so we had, let's say right now, I forget which book I'm going to look at, maybe Land of Gold. So in the past, this Land of Gold book, let's say I want to give the student, I want them to pass, I would actually have to change their quiz score or change their reading speed, which we didn't like because you're actually modifying the data, or what you could also call it the evidence, depending on the reason you are changing. And you might not want to do that. So we've added a new feature here called Override Book Credit, which simply means you can keep the reading data exactly how it is, but give them credit or take credit away for that book. Okay, so you just press Edit, and you can change this to the actual, means whatever the original data was, override it, give credit for that book or give no credit for that book. Okay, so it makes it a little bit easier. And again, you still have the original data there. While we added this, if you notice, we added three more tabs. Oops, sorry. You can also, while you're here, get the quiz results for this specific book. Just scroll down and you'll see what they are. And the user logs for this specific book if you don't want to check the full user logs. Okay, so it's all available in this pop-up. Again, you just press the edit icon next to the book and you can see that. Okay. Another feature that teachers have been asking almost since we launched Xreading is the ability to give bonus words. I believe this is something that's available in MReader, so a lot of teachers kind of were used to using it. And simply means is if you want to give your students some additional credit, maybe they read a book that's not in Xreading, or they've just done something good in class, and you want to give them some credit for that activity. We have a button now called bonus words. If you press this, you get a pop-up. Okay, and you can indicate exactly which students, I should say first, you can decide it has to go into an assignment. With Xreading, everything is assignment based. So you have to decide which assignment you want to go into and what the bonus is going to be, and decide which students you want to receive this bonus. Okay, so it could be one student, it could be all the students. It's only available at a class level. You can't give every student in your institution a bonus, but I think being able to do an entire class at once is good. You press add, and when a student logs in, they're going to see bonus words, and they're going to have, actually, I don't know why it doesn't say it, but it should say 5,000 words right here, okay? Okay, that way you can easily give words to students. You can also edit them and take them away if you realize you made a mistake or the student doesn't deserve those words. I think you can also give minus bonus words. I don't know if we call them minus bonus, but penalty words. Yeah, well, you can also give penalty words. I think it does allow a negative number. Okay, another key feature is journals. I created Xreading and all the quizzes initially because I did not like having my students write journals or summary every time they read a book, but I've come to realize it is suitable. In fact, there was a presentation yesterday. Sorry, I can't remember who gave it, but Noriko gave it about how her students enjoyed writing. It wasn't just boring summaries, she was having them write interesting reactions to the books. So we thought, let's add a journal feature. So it's part of assignment settings. We put the word beta there. Beta simply means if there's anything wrong, don't get too angry. And you can turn it on. And you can, this is all optional. You can put a required minimum word count, required maximum word count, but again, not required. You can indicate what type, a review, a summary, a reaction, something like that, or other. And you can indicate, can students do the journal anytime they want, or do they have to complete it before the assignment closes? Quite similar to the quizzes. There's a similar setting for quizzes. Do they have to take the quiz before the assignment ends or not? Okay. And you add, so again, this is in assignment settings, you add it. Now let's say a student chooses breaking free. They've read the book now, okay? They already have their reading data, and they can go to the journal tab. So they've read more books, but sorry. These books were not in an assignment with a journal. So only books in an assignment with a journal are going to show up here. It has no information. We tried again, make it as simple as possible for the students. Here's the instructions. Here's the add journal button. They press that. They can just type in their journal, tells them how many words. I think this will be read until they reach the minimum that they've been told. It will turn red if they go over the maximum. They can save it. They can edit it. It tells them how many words. Okay. On the teacher side, the teacher can see, yep, and again, I'm sorry, I'm only showing this with one book, but a teacher will be able to see for each student all the books they've read and can press the edit icon here, or the grade, and the teacher can read it, give a grade, make a comment, submit it. And then when the teacher, this is the student side now, the student will be able to see exactly what the teacher has written about their journal. Okay. The student cannot modify the journal once it's been graded. Okay. I don't know if anybody's used this feature yet, so I'd love to get feedback from anybody who is using it just to see how it's working out. For the most part, it's very much true. No news is usually good news. So since I haven't heard anything, I assume it's working or just nobody's used it. Oh, Pat, is that a thumbs up? Have you used it?
Yeah, about halfway through the semester, I stopped using quizzes and moved over to just journals.
Really? Okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
And what I noticed is that students can open up that journal as many times as they like until it's graded, which seems like it could be really good for those long books. As my students said, oh, I kind of forgot what happened at the beginning when I got to the end. So they can kind of, as they're reading along, kind of remind themselves.
Excellent. Good. And again, if anybody else is using it, again, it's only when things go wrong that I get feedback often. So it would be good. Although the live monitoring, a lot of teachers said was just very helpful. Restricting MReader quizzes. So we added the MReader quizzes. MReader, if you saw Tom's presentation yesterday, has so many wonderful settings. We do not have so many of those settings, partially because we don't need a lot of them, but some of them would be useful. As you know, you can restrict the books in Xreading, but it was only the digital books. So we've recently been able to restrict the MReader books as well. If you choose digital and physical books, then the, how can I say this? Okay, so if you choose the book type, digital and physical, then it will automatically restrict the MReader books. So in other words, if you've said, I should preface this by saying, we have given an Xreading level to every MReader book, which was very easy for the lower level books, but the higher level books, it was quite difficult because the levels didn't match up anymore. But in the end, we came up with a formula. So we have an Xreading level for every MReader book that corresponds to it. So if you have indicated that I want my students to be able to read only Xreading books level 1 to 5, when they search MReader, they will only be able to search those same books at that level. The problem is, what do you do if it's only physical books? You can, despite Xreading being a digital library, you can restrict the assignment so students can only choose physical books, okay? Which is, we did that primarily for schools that make 2 assignments, parallel assignments, one for digital and one for physical, and students were accidentally adding digital books to the physical book assignment. So we've now restricted it, it can be physical only. In that case, there's a setting here called restrict physical books by criteria, and you can see here, you can restrict them either by their Xreading level or their MReader level. By their Xreading level or by the words in the book. Okay, just keep in mind these numbers, if you just do decide to use this, these numbers are not dynamic, meaning they don't refresh when you select certain criteria, they're not going to change, meaning you could accidentally have too many restrictions and your students would have options to no books. Just be a little careful if you use that. Just for example, if you chose very long books and a very low level, there would be no books available for the students. Okay, moving on, pre-reading vocabulary review. Some graded readers, many graded readers have a glossary at the end with lots and lots of words. Some books have very short glossaries at the beginning for pre-reading. Before you read, familiarize yourself with these words so you can enjoy the story more. I'm pretty convinced with a physical book, students spend very little time on these kind of pages. On a digital book, even less. Therefore, we have integrated pre-reading vocabulary. It's by default, it's optional. You can require it or hide it. It only is available for certain books. Then when a student goes to add a book, they could be either required or given the option to do pre-reading vocabulary. It's basically the same thing that you'd see on this page. but turned into a simple multiple choice quiz. They can choose a cave is obvious. Oh no, that's incorrect. Oh, there it is, correct. And we've set it on mastery learning, basically meaning they have to go through every word until they get it right. If they get one wrong, it goes to the end of the list and they go through it again, but they only see the ones they got wrong. The ability to send messages. This is an upcoming feature. Announcements you can send to the whole school. This will be for a particular student, just like chatting or messages in like Facebook or something like that. And I think the final feature to talk about that I have demonstrations of is a speed reading. ABEX has come out or coming out soon with a series of speed reading or reading for speaking fluency books. I'm convinced, or I should say Paul Nation has convinced me that while extensive reading is very useful for students in increasing and improving their reading speed, a dedicated speed reading component to a course is going to be more effective. So we're going to take these books and make a digital version Xreading. Students will be able to, it's the same reading, but we're trying to make it into like a format that gives them the idea this is something that should be done quickly. We give them instructions. They start it. Again, the idea it's a race. They read through it. They finish and we'll give them their time. And that time will then be displayed on a graph showing them. If anybody's done speed reading with your students, you know students do make progress pretty quick. So I think it's going to be very encouraging for them to see that. Some additional features we have coming, additional things we have coming, the interactive dictionary, which I've been talking about for years, but we are finally going to try to get that done within the next 6 to 12 months, not years. Forums, this will be another way for students and teachers to interact, but in a sharing ideas, maybe like a blog. I'm not a social media person, so I don't really know exactly what it'll look like, but I'll talk to some people who do know these things and get some ideas. Basically, again, so teachers and students can share ideas about a specific book or a specific topic, not just one-on-one communication. A leaderboard for competitions and offline access. Xreading is expanding in places where the internet is not as common and students want to download a book while they have internet access and read it while they don't. That is a major project, but we're working on that. Some other features, other projects is Xreading for independent authors. Rob Waring's helping with that, and we're still trying to finalize some plans, but then we will definitely be making an announcement to any teachers who want to submit either any book they want or for some specific series that he and I are considering. Books with specific majors. A colleague or an associate of mine just wrote 10 books for nursing majors or medical majors that are absolutely fantastic. They are high level, but we plan to add them probably in the next 6 months. Rob is working on a series for business majors, and there's some other series in the works. The student writing competition I mentioned before. And finally, an extensive reading textbook for schools that want to, they have a 4 skills class, but want to also have an extensive reading component. They don't know how to do both. So it's going to be a regular textbook, not just extensive reading, but more of a textbook with an extensive reading combined with it. Okay, and I think I'm just about out of time. Thank you for listening. If you have any questions, I think we have about 2 minutes. Comments, suggestions, anybody wants a free trial of Xreading, let me know. There's my email address.
Yes, well, you've got about 2 minutes, but there is 15 minutes until the next presentation starts.
Oh, okay.
So there's
Great.
a little of wiggle room here for Q&A if you need.
I don't mind wiggling.
Show us how good you can wiggle, Paul.
So yeah, so if anybody has any questions, I'm really happy to see so many people joining today, and many of you I know are using Xreading already, so I hope these new features are what you will find useful. If you have suggestions for others, sometimes I get suggestions all the time, and that's where I got some of these ideas from. Often I've thought about them already, but hearing from another teacher that it's something they really want to use, persuades us to add it sooner. So are there any specific, I see a lot of things in the chat. I don't think I can look through 80 chats, but anybody want to call out any questions?
Paul?
I'm so sorry.
That's right.
Hi, can I ask, I put the question on the chat pane. You said you might have a Japanese graded reader. That's a great news. And just as Sophie did in French readers, whom do I have to convince to go ahead? I really want to see more Japanese graded readers on Xreading or anywhere. So that's a great news for us.
Okay, so how books get on, a good question, how books get on Xreading, that there's two gatekeepers. One is me,
yeah.
Because
yeah.
I've had publishers who've asked to put books on Xreading that I just didn't think were suitable. I fully acknowledge not every book on Xreading is great, but I've tried to make, Xreading is really for foreign language, students studying English or language as a foreign language, or maybe as a second language. It's not for first language learners. And some publishers either don't understand the difference or just convinced that their books are suitable for everybody. So I've had to tell some publishers, your books are beautiful, but they're just not really suitable for Xreading. And the bigger gatekeeper, though, is typically the publisher. As many of you know, Oxford decided to take their books off of Xreading. I'm still a Pearson, or a Penguin, Pearson they're now called, has we've been negotiating for about 4 years, but they've not agreed. But it's primarily the publisher. So in the case of English or Japanese graded readers, if I can connect with the publisher and can ask them and make a request if we can put their books in Xreading. To be honest, if teachers complain to publishers, I won't say which publisher, but it's a big one, and their books are on Xreading for many years. But the reason those books are on Xreading is because many teachers said, hey, we're not going to buy graded readers anymore because we're just not, there's no room, it doesn't fit into our library. And they persuaded that publisher to put books on to put their books on Xreading. And it was, as I said, it was not a small publisher. So perhaps if some of the other publishers hear from teachers, for example, Penguin has now put out all their books. The original Penguin, which is now owned by Random House, it's a complicated story. But I've approached them and they've just said flat out, no, we're going to sell our books in Japan. And I don't know anybody who's really buying them. I don't know any, I've talked to some teachers who are using physical books and digital books, and none of them are using the new Penguin books. So maybe they will start to realize that a place like Xreading is a good platform, because I think the publishers do make good revenue. Obviously, nobody's going to share exactly what they're doing, financial information, but some of the smaller publishers have told me they now make more revenue from Xreading than they do from selling their physical books. So yeah, Mitsuei, if you have connections with Japanese publishers, there was the three professors who presented yesterday. Yeah. And or maybe on Thursday, I don't remember, but I only saw the end of their presentation, but they seemed to have some really nice materials. And I would connect with them.
Yeah, but it's only 20-something books in it. So I thought if we are allowed to sort of go ahead, translate some of the great books on Xreading into Japanese, that's faster ways to increase numbers of Japanese great readers.
Yeah, that's another option. Yeah, so if anybody's interested in translating, if Cengage has agreed to French and Spanish, I think they would be agreeable. The problem is the author doesn't make very much money. Because the reason Cengage agreed to it is because they still get the revenue, for the translated version.
Yeah. Okay.
Great. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Sure. Oh yes, thank you. Thanks for the great pictures. And it's about how about the placement test? Can we use it again? Because it encourages some new users of Xreading.
Oh, I'm sorry. Who's asking?
It's me, Ondra, from Mongolia, Onderma.
Oh, great. Yes. So the placement test is now working again.
Oh, that's good.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, Tom Robb, I love Tom, but he changes things sometimes on his side. And because Tom Robb created that placement test. And
cool.
There was we were no longer connecting. He moved it to a different server. We figured out the problem, and the placement test is working again. Yeah, and our plan though is to eventually develop a different kind of placement test as well. But I think the one he created is for right now, it's quite good, especially if teachers understand it's going to put students at a relatively low level. And as long as they expect that, and that's what we want. We want students to start at a lower level, read the books that they're comfortable at. After many years, Atsuko Takase has persuaded me that it is really best to start with simple stories for students to build up that fluency, even if it's just a couple of weeks or a week. start with very easy stories, and they'll quickly move up to higher levels in Xreading, the way our level system has been developed.
Paul, if I can ask about the placement test, this is Glenn.
Yep.
I'm going to have the same cohort of students from spring to fall semester, but they'll be taking obviously, a different physical course. How can they maintain the placement level that they had from spring when they enter the fall course?
Well, that placement level is theirs. It's not relative to the course.
Oh, I see. So it won't change for them.
Nope, it will stay exactly the same.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep, sure.
Thank you, Paul.
We got a question from first Bob and then Makoto of the people I can see. Bob and then Makoto.
Can I?
Oh, okay. Bob, we can't hear you. Your mic is muted. So
sorry. Yeah. Thanks always for all your great work with Xreading. It's been great. I'm just passing on some questions from the chat. One person asked, is it available only for institutions? And another person asked, how can they get this in China?
Okay. I developed Xreading planning. It would be for institutions with the idea of soon developing it for individual users. We haven't done that yet. We're still planning on it. It's quite more challenging.